Today we're going to talk about self-persuasion, but we're going to speak about it from the perspective of NLP Frame Control. In our last video, we spoke about the topic of frame control. I brought it up a few times and the importance of recognizing that it exists so that we could be better as far as communication goes with others, as well as self-persuasion, maintaining our ideal state of mind. We're going to start this conversation off with a quote from James Allen, very important, which is pretty much the essence of frame control here. From his book, The Heavenly Life, he says, "Said a great teacher to his disciples, those who shall be a lamp unto themselves, relying upon themselves only, and not relying upon any external help, but holding fast to the truth as their lamp, and seeking their salvation in the truth alone, shall not look for assistance to any besides themselves. It is they amongst my disciples who shall reach the very topmost height, but they must be willing to learn." Now, what we're referring to here is a really elevated state of mind. Our goal on this journey is to move from external locus of control, being from the understanding that the power is in the outer world, to internal locus of control, to realizing that the power is in the inner world. Now, this is a journey of identifying beliefs, assumptions, perspectives that we have, and constantly, on a day-to-day basis, identifying the accurate interpretation within that brings us into internal locus of control. Now, what will happen as a result is you will have a higher degree of self-persuasion towards your vision. This self-persuasion will be translated, externalized as influence, persuasion. People at a deep level are looking to be led by those that know where they're going, that are in a mutual benefit, as well as we call the spirit of harmony, benefit for us, others, divine, and evolution. The idea of maintaining this state of mind is one that is important for our journey because so much of this journey of creating success involves relationships. We want to be able to relate to each other. Now, what's interesting during the interactions that we have with each other is there's something invisible going on that we a lot of times cannot perceive, but we understand that it exists. There's an invisible premise to every interaction. And if you look at two people interacting, or you observe a group of people interacting, you will see that one person seems to stand out. They are said to have the dominant frame or frame control. What you'll notice is that people are reactive to this person, or they are listening attentively to this person. They are assimilating the person's beliefs, ideas, assumptions, and perspectives on reality. Now, as a result, they begin to behave differently, maybe in the moment or after the interactions. This important invisible dialogue that is occurring, this nonverbal form of communication, is one we want to deeply understand if we want to be relatable to others. And going back to the James Allen quote, self-reliance, self-confidence, and self-persuasion is the way. Now, a frame, the way we can describe this invisible occurrence, is a set of beliefs, values, assumptions, and perspectives that govern five-sensory interpretation in relation to others. Very similar to when we refer to body of beliefs, belief system, a paradigm. If a person has a certain paradigm, they're going to experience reality from that perspective. When they interact with another person who has a similar paradigm, they seem to be relatable. If they interact with someone who has a different paradigm, perhaps polarizingly opposite of a paradigm, they may seem to have a conflict unless one of the individuals has very powerful frame control understanding and frame control ability. as in they know how to connect and relate with the other person in a way that merges them into one single frame. And thus, there is a commonality. So everybody occupies a frame, whether they realize it or not. And this is happening subconsciously, and it's invisible. A lot of times we cannot perceive it unless we look at behavioral changes or observe certain patterns in our behaviors. We can feel it, however. We can feel the vibes. And always remember that in interactions, the dominant frame takes control. And our goal in self-persuasion is to be self-persuaded to the point where if we show up in the presence of somebody that has a dominant frame, that we don't lose ourselves and fall into their state of mind if it's not in harmony and in contribution to our vision. As well as we want to bring others into our state of mind or our frame, provided that there is a mutual benefit. For example, in team building, if you're building a business, or relationship building, what you want is to have a commonality, a common ground, a common frame that you share. And knowing this information, we take the responsibility from the perspective of really understanding what the values, beliefs, assumptions, and perspectives are that you embody, who you represent in relation to your vision, and relating with others in a way that is complementary to their paradigm. Now, this whole concept of frame control can seem very advanced, but we can get better at it with practice. And as we get better at it with practice, which has been what we have been discussing over the videos, we'll notice that we're more relatable with others. People seem to externalize our own state of mind. Everywhere we go with this conscious state of mind, we'll notice that others seem to represent it. They reflect that same state of mind. And it's a desirable state of mind because it's made up of certain qualities, which we'll talk about in a moment. So reflecting the state of mind onto another or in another is what we refer to as frame transference, or transferring the frame. Frame control, merging the frames. Always remember this, as we've been saying in our conversations. I am is the state of mind we occupy. So what is the state of mind? The state of mind is the frame of mind that we are subconsciously, you could say, imposing onto another person. We either have an ideal state of mind or we have certain states of mind that we would call undesirable. When we're interacting with each other, it's important to remember that most of us is subconscious, and that subconscious aspect of ourselves, which is usually buried deep in our self-image, unless we bring forth more conscious awareness on our self-image, the attributes that make up our self-image, is being transferred over to the other person when we have not consciously gone into the ideal state of mind that we have selected and desired to be in, one that is of harmony with the other person or the group of individuals. So the state of mind, that which we occupy, as discussed in the conversations we've been having with the Neville Goddard information, is also looked at as our frame. What are we saying I am to? What is the identity? Now, when we have identified with the state of mind, we are either consciously saying I am to that state of mind, or if we have fallen into that state of mind, which represents perhaps somebody else's frame, then we are subconsciously saying I am to that state of mind. We now become convicted in that state, level of conviction. And the level of conviction that we have, what we say I am to, the state of mind, and we want the consciously chosen state of mind, compels us into action. So we begin to behave a certain way, communicate a certain way, interact with others a certain way, as well as others begin to also change to reflect that same state of mind. Now in leadership, this is very important because we want to maintain frame control, but we want to do it from a perspective of benefit. Benefit for us, others, divine, and evolution. Why? Because there is contained within us a deep part of us that wants harmony. And so a leader or someone that has very dominant frame control that awakens those attributes within us is one that we are going to become awakened with. That's the way to look at it. And what happens is we align with them, and their true self, their true identity is brought forth, our true self. In other words, we realize more of who we are around certain people. Reflect upon this for a moment. Notice how in your life you have stood in the presence of others that inspired you. They made you feel more alive. And a lot of times it wasn't necessarily what they said, but you felt a lot like yourself. You felt inspired, encouraged. You felt you could do anything, be anything, more accurately put, who you really want to be. Whether that individual knows it or not, they have awakened certain attributes in themselves that brings forth mutual awakening, both living the true self. And we all have the true self, the true identity, otherwise referred to as becoming the highest version of ourselves. Some individuals have the ability to bring forth the highest version of ourselves. We have the ability to, when we embody these attributes, which we're going to talk about in a moment here, from the perspective of self-persuasion and frame control, bring forth those attributes in ourselves and observe as it externalizes, as those attributes that are in relation to the other individual's true self being brought forth through the presence. And yes, of course, you'll use words and communication and so forth, because that's part of it, but it'll be done naturally. And so the other person then will automatically allow themselves to go into that frame because of what it represents. And what does it represent? Well, in a book discussion that I did a few years ago, I talked about the concept of charisma. And Olivia Fox Cabane, who wrote the book, The Charisma Myth, that was the discussion. She mentioned that there was 3 attributes, I'm going to quote from this book here as we get deeper into this conversation, that represents charisma. And these are also important attributes for frame control. She says power, presence, and warmth. Now, let's go deeper into these elements and weave it into our discussion. So she was referring to power. And she states it as being seen as powerful means being perceived as able to affect the world around us. Okay, so our ability, our presence, where we go, who we are, affects the world around us. In other words, we are the cause of where we go. When we walk into a room, people respond, they take note. We notice that the vibe changes, the body language change. Now, if you go into an interaction in that way, then you already have a very dominant frame. It's subconscious. Some of the attributes that I've discovered, and I've studied leadership for many years and worked with many leaders, many that have very dominant, powerful frames. I studied and I said, what are the attributes that made them so? So I want to share some of them right here, which we want to integrate into our being for, again, 2 reasons. Number 1, the degree of self-persuasion we have in ourself. And number 2, the externalization of the degree of self-persuasion we have in ourselves, in our teams, in those that we choose to harmonize with. Expertise, enthusiasm, on point, and courage. Expertise, you have specialized knowledge, you have wisdom, you have experience. That is perceived as an indication of power. If someone has a certain level of expertise, we're more likely to listen to them. Beneficial expertise. And this is acquired through experience. So whatever it is that we're proficient in our journey for creating success, we eventually become leaders. And the leadership is built on the foundation of our expertise. So it's important to commit ourselves to acquiring expertise in our chosen areas. Now, when you have a certain degree of expertise, you will automatically bring forth this power. So a key when it comes to frame control is we're not trying to get the frame. The moment you try to get the frame, it implies that you do not have it. And when you imply it that you do not have it to yourself, you know you're lying, and others know you're lying as well. One has to embody it. They have to live the philosophy. Number 2, enthusiasm. So not only is that expertise there, but the enthusiasm to share that expertise with others, for the benefit of others, for the benefit of the collective, represents power. On point. So the leader becomes more proficient, develops communication skills so they can articulate in a way that facilitates behavioral change, transformational change. And they do it in a way that transcends the conscious objections. Now, what I mean by this is Let's talk about sales. In sales, one of our goals is to be able to identify our prospects, engage in a harmonious conversation, interaction with our prospects, and communicate in a way that helps them realize that our product or service is of benefit for them. And perhaps in the conversation, they will have objections. Now, if a person does not have a certain level of expertise and enthusiasm and direction in leadership, they might become reactive. We'll talk about reactivity in a moment, but they might become reactive to the objections of the other person, seeing those objections as a blow to the ego. You've essentially lost the frame. Now, your reactivity might cause me to react, and then I could lose the frame. But if I maintain a presence of mind, regardless of your reactivity, you will eventually start to subconsciously see me as the leader. That's because that foundation of not being reactive is built on expertise, understanding, courage, enthusiasm, elements of power. Now, we experience this in consulting, in coaching, in leadership, so much that I've been involved with for the last 10-something years. And what I've noticed is that from every interaction that I've ever been in these dynamics, I recognize that to the degree that I can remain consistent and persistent, that the other person is already, right now, that ideal version of themselves, or how they see themselves to be from the perspective of empowerment. In other words, referring back to what we were saying earlier, the true self. If they were reactive in the start of the conversation and even remained reactive for a period of time, they will eventually let go and go into the frame that they subconsciously want, which is beyond the surface level mental chatter that was causing the reactivity. And they become awakened then to those attributes of themselves. And then they begin to think for themselves, move in the direction, be in harmony. And also, they respect you more. So these attributes, power, being seen as powerful means being perceived as being able to affect the world around us. And if someone is reactive to us, and we then become reactive to that, then we are being affected by that. It is said then you lose the frame. Now, keep into consideration that frame control can a lot of times be considered to be a very lengthy, deep conversation. So I wouldn't profess that we would be able to cover as many attributes as I would like on this conversation, but we will be over the upcoming conversations. And so much has to do with self-persuasion. That's the key. The next being presence. The ability to be fully present makes you stand out from the crowd and makes you memorable. So we want to combine this now. Power is the direction, the enthusiasm, the on point, the courage, the expertise. Attributes that I have found that I have been identifying and cross-referencing with powerful leaders. Presence is being in the now. So if it's too much power and not enough presence, then it would appear that you're talking at the person rather than communicating with the person and relating with the person. That's the difference. So we want to be present, listening to the person, understanding. So that's why I put these three attributes there. Self-awareness, discernment, learner. We have a more dominant, lasting frame. And thus, it would appear then that you have the frame, but it's really a joint mutual benefit. So the key of frame control is not to get the frame to overpower the other person and win. It is to bring forth harmony from a place of power, but then from a place of presence so you can connect with and all things added from that state of mind, as in both of you or your team working together in harmony. The next is warmth. Warmth, simply put, is goodwill towards others. Warmth tells us whether or not people will want to use whatever power they have in our favor. So if someone's got a deep level of power, doesn't mean that they're trustworthy. If someone has a deep level of power and presence, still, subconsciously, we might not interpret it as trustworthy. And when we add a degree of warmth with this integrity, respect, and gratitude, By embodying the elements of integrity, respect, and gratitude, and connection with another person, deep connection with another person, where they can feel it. They can say, you really understand me. I feel that you really understand me. And they feel that you are trustworthy, then you have that degree of warmth. Now we want to combine this all together, because in order to have the strong frame, we want power, presence, and warmth. So it's important then to develop these attributes in our day-to-day. And these attributes, a lot of times, are developed organically on our journey. Okay, if you've been in business for an extended period of time, chances are you have been developing these attributes. If you've been in your career for an extended period of time, chances are you have been developing these attributes. Whatever it is, your area of expertise, whatever area you have chosen to dedicate your life to, you have noticed that if communication was involved, either directly or indirectly, you are developing these attributes. But bringing conscious awareness to them by saying, I want to be from a place of power, which simply means direction, with a deep level of presence, that means one with, connected with the people in front of you. A large part of neuro-linguistic programming is considered pacing and leading. But in order to lead others, you have to pace first. So the presence allows us to pace with the other person. And the third being warmth. So just because we pace with another person doesn't mean that the other person is going to feel that we have their best interests in mind. So all of this, as you can see here, comes from a place of authenticity. None of this stuff can be faked. If it is faked, then perhaps a certain level of frame control is experienced. But once that other person recognizes that this was all a manipulative act, they will lose the trust. And that's not what we're looking to do. All of this needs to be built from a foundation of authenticity. This is powerful because it's deep in human psychology, and it's there for a reason. And in order to awaken this attribute within ourselves, one can say it's a big responsibility. Because when you can cultivate through the authentic being and living the philosophy of the different things that we have spoken about, a level of power and conviction in yourself, recognizing that you are the cause, the creator, and the interpreter of reality, a deep level of presence and connectedness with others, and a level of warmth and understanding, knowing that you are in the best interest. That's why I brought up the spirit of harmony, benefit for us, others, and divine and evolution, otherwise known as the golden rule. When we integrate these elements, then what happens is a mutual benefit. This is what facilitates mutual beneficial fair deals. And in the last handful of videos peppered throughout there, I mentioned that money is a way of exchanging value. You have value, they have value, and they might not be able to give you the value you're looking for, but they can translate that value into a currency and pay you for your services, and it's completely fair, and it's mutually beneficial. That's all done from a certain state of mind, of a person that has made peace between their inner world and outer world and others. And so once we instill those kinds of attributes on the journey, then what happens is we have a deeper level of presence because we're not afraid to ask for the money. You are present to the moment and ask for the money. And you do it from a place of direction, as in, here's how much it's going to cost. Here are the benefits you're going to receive. Here are the services that will be delivered. Here are the times in which I will deliver it. And if you would like to move forward with this deal, here's where you can sign to get started. That level of power, as well as communicated from a place of warmth. You see how this three go very well together and need to be infused. And I can assure you this, that when I was first introduced to this book and came to the concept of power, presence, and warmth, I made it a thing to go and integrate it to the deepest ability that I could. And I continuously find that there's more opportunity to integrate these three elements. So this is more about preemptive frame control. So when you're in the moment where you're in the interaction with another person, where you want to maintain that unwavering self-persuasion, that control of the frame, if you have not done the work prior to that to build yourself up, then it would be akin to going and trying to play a sport at a professional level when you have never practiced it or trained at any point in your life before. So we want to do all these things and learn all these things prior. It's an ongoing journey. And you must be willing to learn all these attributes. And as you learn these attributes, and as stated, we're discussing only a handful because frame control is a very deep topic. And all of these have been elements that I found through my experience in consulting and coaching, working with others, sales, training, leadership, and so forth. What happens is we become more proficient at it. And as we become more proficient at it, then what we'll notice is that if we show up in an interaction where we can feel that the people that we're communicating have a dominant frame, we'll be able to maintain the state of mind. So here are some facilitators that you can have while you're in an interaction. Number one, stay in a calm, confident, internal state so that your emotional contagion effect is positive. That's one of the elements of frame control. However, if you have, to a certain degree, integrated these abilities within you, these attributes within you, then what you'll notice is it's going to be easier. But if you have not, you might find yourself trying to argue or fight the other frame. Number two, express high expectations of people and communicate your complete confidence in their ability to rise to the occasion. So, if your reality, if your self-persuasion is one of true confidence, then you have confidence in the other person. You have confidence that the other person is in the right place and at the right time, and you are in the right conversation. And you have confidence, and you have a deep level of it, to recognize that you'll figure it out through the conversation. You'll be able to dialogue, have a conversation. It's going to be one from power, presence, and warmth, and maybe there might be some reactivity, but you'll overcome that reactivity. Because you believe in the other person, you're essentially looking to awaken the true identity of the other person, helping the other person become a higher version of himself. Number three, articulate a bold vision. Show your confidence in your ability to realize that vision and act decisively to achieve it. Now, if you've been living the philosophy, then this is automatic, autotelic. You'll be in flow about this. But if you have not, then what will happen is it'll look like you're trying too hard, while at the same time you have lost that invisible frame. So very important that when we look at these attributes, we look at them as things we do proactively, becoming an expert in our area of communication, those things that we communicate about. Do it from a place of genuine enthusiasm to awaken those attributes in the other person, bring forth their true self, higher version of themselves. Develop and communicate from a place that speaks deeply and resonant, on point with the other person. Have the courage to speak the truth and hold, as was stated here, holding fast as the truth as their lamp and seeking their salvation in the truth alone. Now, automatically that brings forth a lot of confidence. Presence, the integrity, the respect, the gratitude, self-awareness, cause and effect reflection. This is what we talk about a lot. Reflecting upon each interaction you have with a person in your day-to-day business dealings with your team and so forth, and reflecting at the end of the day and saying, how could I have integrated power, presence, and warmth to a higher degree? Was it an expertise thing? Was it an enthusiasm thing? Was I not on point and clear? Did I not demonstrate enough courage? Was I not operating from a place of integrity? Did I not have a degree of respect for the other person that awakened the trust, gratitude for them? Now, if you encounter reactivity, which happens in the journey, our goal is to use the information that we've been learning, states of mind, changing beliefs, assumptions within, to evolve past them. Because elements like doubt, overwhelm, impatience, discouragement, and shame tend to be the reactivity points that can cause us to lose the frame when we're interacting with the other person. If we're overwhelmed with the interaction, we want to remember a few things. Number one, focus on what can be done right now. This is the state of mind. Focus on what can be done right now. No need to make things too complicated than they have to be. What can be done right now that can move us in the direction of our vision? Remember, everything does not need to be done right away. By setting smaller goals and focusing on what can be done, we feel less overwhelmed. So as a result of living this way, if we encounter some overwhelm on our journey, and by the way, these are things that we want to do prior to the interactions with others to the best of our ability. So we live the philosophy. That way, when you're in the presence of another person, it's authentic. Because remember, the whole thing about frames is the other person is looking to experience your congruence or your level of congruence and authenticity. So if you try to fake it, then it's not going to work. This has to be done from a place of authenticity. Very important. Everything does not need to be done right away. By setting smaller goals and focusing on what can be done, we feel less overwhelmed. Maintain a state all throughout your day of less overwhelm, and you'll find yourself having less overwhelm in the interactions. And if somebody shows up with an overwhelming frame, the core dominant frame will be one of harmony. So all you have to do is maintain, which you have already been doing, a state of harmony and calmness within, which will then externalize as them going into that calm frame. Next is doubt. Be in environments that inspire and open your mind to the possibility of your vision. So being very selective in the kind of environments, the places that we go, and how it's impressing our mind with information that is going to recreate itself is very important, because then what happens is we're going to live from that dominant state. Now, I've seen this many times when it comes to sales or presentations. A person tries to put on a certain kind of persona during the presentation, but meanwhile, all throughout, outside of that, they're not actually living that way. And a lot of times what ends up happening is they lose that frame in the interaction, be it when they're pitching for a business deal or a sales presentation and so forth. It's far easier to just live the philosophy and ensure that day to day our environments are set up in a way where we live that way. So when we show up to the presentation, we're authentic, and that's how we really are. There are ways to bring forth your vision that have not been discovered yet. This is important. A lot of times we can have doubt about our goals and our journey to the destination. Recognize that we're constantly on the journey of learning. So there are many ways of bringing forth your vision that is going to be discovered on the journey. So we want to release from doubt and perhaps create some affirmations that go like this. I recognize that there are far more ways to bringing forth my vision that I have yet discovered. I recognize that with each day, I'm going to reveal more ways. They are becoming apparent, and I notice them. I recognize that it has always been that way. When I reflect back on my life, I notice that day by day, I would have higher degrees of clarity. This higher degree of clarity released from doubt and brought forth a higher level of confidence. Next is impatience. So if we find ourselves being reactive, and impatience is one of our reactivity elements. And by the way, one of the ways to look at this is, let's say you're interacting with others and you are feeling overwhelmed, doubt, impatience, discouragement, and shame. These are indicators where you could end up losing your frame. So at the end of the day, you want to be preemptive about this. So our day-to-day, everything outside of the interaction, we want to be releasing these reactivity elements, including impatience. Impatience can be a sign of an excessive need to control rather than to allow. Control the other person and control everything rather than allow. There's a time to act and there's a time to allow. Now, when you maintain a certain state of mind we call flow, then what happens is we know when to act and when not to act. This is very important. But if you find yourself being too impatient, trying to create everything right now rather than allowing things to unfold as they should while taking the necessary actions that moves everything forward, understand this next very important point. There's nothing to prove to anyone. This is a self-realization journey. Now, this is a paramount belief. If you see this as a self-realization journey, if every day you're becoming better and better in your expertise, you're growing, you're evolving, and every single day you're making progress, and on the journey you're going to have successes, and you've already had successes, then you'll notice is you'll release from impatience. The next is discouragement. If you do not insist on the outcome, You let go of the possibility of discouragement and bring it forth in a way that it was meant to be, or make way for something even better. Now, this kind of inner dialogue statement is very powerful because when you're interacting with another person, and since we're referring to frame control and self-persuasion in relation to others, one of the things that causes us to lose the frame is if we try to force it in a certain direction, which has everything to do with what we mentioned earlier when it comes to impatience, trying to control rather than to allow. By forcing and insisting on an outcome, you end up forcing that interaction in a certain direction. And in sales, this can be very devastating. You could lose the relationship with your prospect because you can come off as being too pushy and forceful, but rather be more open-minded and present to what the other person is communicate. Then perhaps you can customize your product or service in a way that aligns and fits what they're looking for. And this is something that we refer to as consultative selling. And I did a couple of discussions on the topic. Number one was Spin Selling by Neil Rackham, as well as The Way of the Wolf by Jordan Belfort. I'll put a link in the description for that. Consultative selling, which is essentially figuring out the pains, needs, desires, and frustrations, and then creating a custom solution rather than trying to force a solution onto another person, even if it doesn't fit them and serves them, is going to be the way to bring forth success in a harmonious way while also maintaining a state of mind. And there's many ways of doing that as you continue to improve in your proficiency in marketing. And I did a whole 3-hour discussion on Jay Abraham's book, Mr. X. I'll put a link in the description. Many ideas over there. You'll have less discouragement. Also, taking a long-term approach will help you release from trying to force the outcome, which will lead to discouragement. Very important. And then finally, we got shame. Shame is something that many of us have identified with, even though it's not truly who we are. We identify with it because we learned it from our past. We have to learn to accept ourselves for who we are right now. One of the most powerful ways to maintain the frame is to accept where you are right now. There's no need to put on a persona and pretend to be someone you're not. And accept yourself is the way to externalize others accepting you. Value everything you have, how you got to where you are right now, and where you are going. What this will do is it'll release from that need to want to please or want to get a reaction, which will get us out of the ideal state of mind and also lose the frame. So if we tie this back into the James Allen quote, we can bring it into a nice summary. He said a great teacher to his disciples, those who shall be a lamp unto themselves. Now, lamp unto themselves means that you recognize that it's fully your responsibility to maintain the ideal state of mind, the frame in which will externalize as the other person representing that frame. And what we want to do is build it on a powerful, solid foundation, as he states here, but holding fast to the truth as their lamp. Now, these attributes here, expertise, enthusiasm, on point, courage, integrity, respect, gratitude, self-aware, discernment, and learner, are universal. People respond to that. If our interpretations of ourselves is one of high proficiency of these elements and continuously evolving in proficiency in these elements, it's going to externalize as the experience of everywhere you go, you have the frame. And that's because people are looking to be led by those towards a mutual benefit that represent those qualities. Very important. And to further that, he says, seeking their salvation in the truth alone shall not look for assistance to any besides themselves. So it's not from a place of selfishness. It's from a place of self-reliance and saintliness, as he also discussed in this book. I recommend reading it, The Heavenly Life by James Allen. And also, as he referred to you here, as he says, it is they amongst my disciples who shall reach the very topmost height. But they must be willing to learn. The topmost height means that if you look at any kind of powerful leaders who tend to have the ability to transfer the state onto another person in a way that others respond favorably, you'll notice that they have these attributes. And that's because they represent them and they embody them. and to the degree that they're self-persuaded in authenticity of representing them, that's going to be the degree of leadership that they will have with their teams. So if you're building a business or you're pulling people together to work as a team, then frame control and self-persuasion, unwavering self-persuasion, is very important. And as always, these elements are powerful because you have full control over it. And number two is it's all from within. Remember, I am is the state of mind that you occupy, the state of mind that you choose to occupy, that embodies those attributes of leadership, reflects on the state of mind of others who appear to accept the frame as you move forward towards your vision. If you want to copy this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.